Hello, and welcome to another episode of Innovate on Purpose, brought to you by the Mindful Innovator, where we help business leaders find clarity so they can innovate and grow their businesses with purpose. We share mindful tips, innovative solutions, and also purposeful leadership advice. And we have the perfect guest to do all of that today here. We have Claire E. Parsons, who is an employment litigation and local government attorney in Cincinnati, Ohio. She's also a mindfulness and compassion teacher and a frequent speaker and writer on the topics of attorney well-being, mental health, stress management, and more. Claire shares writing resources and meditations on her blog, Brilliant Legal Mind, so please check that out. And she's the author of not just one book, but two books. My gosh, How to Be a Badass Lawyer and Mommy Needs a Minute. I love both titles, very creative. And to get to know Claire more, just follow her on her blog and connect with Claire on LinkedIn. Claire, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, so today's topic is going to be really important for our audience. It's why innovators need to manage stress. I mean, we are all stressed out in this world. Innovators, especially because everything's moving so chaotically quick, all trying to figure out how do we apply AI and every other piece of technology. And so tons of stress, tons of quick decisions need to be made. So very important topic. And this is something that I know you can help our audience out with today. So really important topic. But Claire, please just tell the audience a little bit more about your background and kind of, what you've been up to.
Yeah, so usually people want to know how I got into teaching mindfulness. I've been practicing law about 15 years, and about 5 years into my law practice, I got pregnant and had my first daughter. But during that pregnancy, it was kind of a hard time for me, and I struggled with postpartum depression. I had historically suffered with anxiety, overthinking, and all of that for most of my life. And the experience with depression kind of woke me up to the point that I started meditating about a year after that happened, and I was back at work. And actually, it was at the busiest time. I had a trial coming up. I had a huge caseload. I was a new mom. But I started meditating, and it helped me so much more than almost anything ever I tried before. And it just made such a difference that I kept doing it. I eventually got training. I started speaking and writing about it. And it just became this whole extra thing and a big part of my life. And I'm really grateful that it happened.
Wow. Yeah. So just completely just shifting everything from this crazy, chaotic thing, everything going around you, and then all of a sudden finding that space to meditate. I mean, so when you first started, how did you, what did your practice look like?
It was like a minute at a time. So at the time it was around 2013. So the apps and things hadn't quite really become established. So I was kind of finding guided meditations for free on the internet. I didn't really have much of a space. Nowhere in my house was quiet. So I just started at like 1 or 2 minutes a day. Literally, I mostly taught myself through books and things. I read for kind of a long time before I really started doing it. And then I just started sitting. And then eventually I got to the point where I could even sit long enough to do guided meditations. I found free ones. And it wasn't until I started going to retreats a few years later that I realized I could sit in silence by myself pretty effectively. And so now that's what I do most of the time, is just sit for about 30 minutes most days. Sometimes it's a lot shorter than that, and sometimes I miss. That's kind of the way the practice unfolded. I went really gradual with it, but I'm really glad that I did it. And that's how I teach it now, too.
Yeah, it's so important to make sure that you do go in gradual. I know, a lot of people always ask me, how do you meditate? I can't do it. I mean, what do you say to people that can't do meditation?
I mean, one answer is that you don't have to. There's other practices that you can take up, even if your aim is to encourage mindfulness. So one is that you don't have to meditate, but I generally think that when people say they can't meditate, they have rules in their mind about what meditation is supposed to be. And in general, many of those rules aren't really true. There's like best practices and things that you want to do, but like letting go of the perfection is honestly one of the biggest benefits from my practice. So that's how I also try to teach the practice, is to let it be what it is. and maybe let go of some of those goals, even though you know the practice might benefit you. Don't hold those goals so tightly that you get rigid about it. Instead, be flexible and let it guide you, and you'll have a lot better experience with it.
Yeah, it's like if meditation, if your goal is to manage your stress, reduce that stress, and then you have all these goals and guidelines to what it should look like, it's probably just going to add more stress. So you're kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, I mean, and I teach lawyers, so a lot of times they think that they need to focus more or get more disciplined. And honestly, lawyers tend to be able to focus really well. We are pretty disciplined. We are very logical and rational. It's honestly the other stuff that we're missing to get more balanced. And that's kindness and compassion, flexibility, and having some space around things. That actually can make a huge difference in performance and also just happiness in life. And those are kind of the things I think lawyers and professionals tend to be a little more afraid of, but they have so much opportunity for us.
Yeah. So you talk about this like mental space, right? And it kind of creating creativity and courage. I guess can you tell us a little bit about like how that has come to life for you, your clients, of just creating that mental space and how it has increased their creativity and their courage?
Yeah. And so I think when you say clients, are you talking about mindfulness clients or are you talking about like law clients? Because I'm not sure I even distinguish between the two, but I want to make sure I answer your question.
No, it doesn't matter. It's just, when you talk to anybody about mindfulness and how it will apply it, like, how has it, helped with their creativity and courage? And it could even be yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So for me with creativity, mental space, I really truly mean mental space, like at the very fundamental basic level. Like don't get highbrow on this, like literally the space to think and see what your thoughts are. So one of the issues I kind of already mentioned is that overthinking was a huge issue for me for most of my life. I would get so lost in thought about honestly stuff that probably was never going to happen. I mean, as a kid, I remember I would not being able to sleep at night because I was worried about the end of the world, like literally. I mean, and I never told anyone about this kind of tendency because I knew it was kind of weird, but I didn't think I could do anything about it. And so when I started meditating, I could see that I was thinking. And so, what you learn when you meditate is that many of your thoughts are total garbage and they're just mean and nasty and serve no purpose at all. And you can throw them out or just let go of them. But what I also saw was that many of my thoughts were actually ideas. They were ideas for writing. I'm not a real visual thinker when I meditate, Matt, so I'm not sure how you are. I'm much more verbal. So I like hear strands of text or a word will repeat in my mind or something like that. And eventually I realized that this is like a cue for me to write because when I have that happen, I go sit down and write and I've got 1,000 words in a half hour, and at least the good start of a blog post or article. And so what eventually happened was I started to publish my work because I had to let go of it. And then I got really good at writing and explaining all kinds of things and building a body of work. And I was able to do it very quickly because I had to publish it. So it was this thing where it was this dark secret and this thing that caused me so much pain. But when I meditated and sat down and saw the patterns for what they were, it was actually like a superpower. And it's something that has helped me, build my law practice, build self-confidence, and also create work that can actually benefit people and help them understand mindfulness and meditation and what it's all about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you mentioned that you had this event that I think you had at, was it a council office where like you had like standing room only?
Yeah, so I wrote a blog post in 2018 about meditation, and that was the first time I had ever written anything on mindfulness. And then that article got republished in a legal magazine. So that was kind of a neat experience because I was not like a well-known teacher or writer at that point. I was not even certified to teach at that point. But then my Chamber of Commerce has a women's group that I've been really active with. And I was thinking about submitting to talk about mindfulness. And I ended up doing it. And the women, I had two sessions at this summit, and women were bringing chairs in the room. I mean, it was people were sitting on the floor. Like I was a big deal. And they were like, "This is great. How many times have you done this?" And I said, "None." But it went really well. And then it turned into kind of more of a thing because I am in legal organizations, and I turned it into a CLE. And then during the pandemic kind of happened after that, and everyone cared about mental health pretty urgently. And so I just spoke and wrote and kept going. And then I got certified during the pandemic because I had capacity to do it. And I've continued training since. And that's when I launched the blog. So it was kind of this whole thing that came out of nowhere, and I didn't expect. But it, you just kind of have to go with it at a certain point, because it felt good, it helped people, and it helped my law practice too.
That's awesome. So like, what were some of the benefits for your law practice?
So some of them they've been more indirect. I will say, like, you don't necessarily get referrals for work because you're a meditation teacher. But what has happened is, because I have a pretty large network on LinkedIn, that happened because I wanted to write, and because I wrote about mindfulness a lot, and because I am known as a speaker and writer on mindfulness, I get asked to join groups that maybe other people might not, or I make friends with people, or connections with people around mindfulness that otherwise I might not. So I think it has helped me in the same way that other lawyers maybe get work because they like fishing and they get referrals from the guys that they go fishing with, or the kids, the parents of the kids on their soccer, their kids' soccer teams. Like, that's how a lot of referrals happen. I was really surprised to see that it happened for mindfulness, because Ohio and Kentucky is kind of a conservative area. And you would think that there would be some backlash, but that's not what I've experienced. It's just been me being myself, and offering something good to the world. And then a lot of times what happens is good comes back. And so it's been those kind of benefits, but they've been meaningful. And I think the biggest benefit, though, is that I have another thing to do outside of practice. I don't just get to solve problems for clients. I also get to help contribute to the benefit of the world, and do so using skills that I have and showing a different kind of my personality. And so I just think it makes me more balanced and healthy and sane, in a way that I don't think I would be without it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how it kind of just is, there's exponential benefit to the practice, and then adding in the networking and helping others is just, that's amazing. Absolutely. So you talk about like networking being a really important part, and I think you said that was like part of like getting some clarity on how to grow your business. Like, so how would you like recommend folks in the audience here to begin to like really target the right network for them? Like, is there like a part of like your practice that you can use to help get down to that like where you should focus?
So I have not actually been as super like laser focused as some people have been, but I think some of it is because it's been organic. So a lot of times I've been focusing on lawyers and professionals, and it didn't feel like I was focusing. It just felt like I was being me, right? But I think because of my target, and because of my experience, it's always targeted at the right folks. But I honestly think that a lot of people, when they start out with content creation or networking or some of these things, I think they are looking to have a degree of perfection, and focus that I don't think you can always have until you get started. So my advice would probably be, stop thinking so much and get started. But I do think once you get started, then considering the impact of your approach and the effectiveness of it, once you get some data points under your belt, then that might be where you start. Now, if you've got some data to look at going forward at the beginning, that's great. A lot of people don't. And I think what I see is that a lot of people get ideas in their head that they can't do it. It would be too hard. It won't be worth it. Nobody will care. All of those kind of doubts. And then they just don't do anything. And for me, yeah. And for me, I think for me, meditation really did help with the doubt aspect of it, because I did have one of my first retreat experiences. I had a specific doubt attack, and I saw through it, and it really did help. So if you don't have a practice like that for checking doubt, I mean, I would recommend a coach or your support network or whatever. But I would say get started and try to keep data and signs of growth where you can. But don't delay that, because that's where you're going to gather the information. And honestly, when you start to get started, you're building some work to share with other people, and that'll make your efforts a lot easier. It's so easy for me now. Like, if people want information about me as a speaker, I have a link to send them. If they want an article on a certain topic, I've probably got it on the blog. So, and I've already thought through a lot of these things. So pitching an idea to speak is not hard at all. So starting that process of doing the work can really, really help you in your efforts. And I'll also say, like, if I'm an introvert, I don't like networking at all. But if you go to events and you've already thought through things, or you're putting stuff out there, it's just a lot easier to talk about yourself. And honestly, some people may come up to you and approach you because they've heard of your work. So it might make the whole process easier to get started with gathering that body of work in whatever medium you do it.
Yeah, just get started and don't wait for perfection and keep on polishing or worrying about that it's not good enough. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that good. I mean, honestly, like, it doesn't have to be, and honestly, it's probably better than you think, but it doesn't have to be that amazing. I mean, some of the thing that cracks me up about my blog, Matt, I mean, some of the most basic ideas are the ones that have gotten the most views and the most likes and engagement. And it always makes me laugh. Like, literally, one of the posts that had the most likes on my blog, it was one where one of my friends shared something on Facebook, and I thought to comment about it, but I thought it was a little overbearing, so I decided to turn it into a blog post. And then that was it. And it was just like, is meditation a spiritual practice? Super basic concept, probably an answer most people could come to on their own, but people loved it. And so don't overthink this, because sometimes the basic stuff is honestly the most helpful to other people.
That makes sense. I want to go back to that first retreat and that experience about doubt, because I have a feeling that that's a big topic for a lot of innovators that are trying to grow their business, and they think they have a great idea, or maybe they think it's a horrible idea. They just doubt it, or no one's going to like it. Like, so I want to dig into that piece of it. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about that experience with doubt, how you identified it, and what you did about it?
Yeah, so for me, when I'm talking about doubt, I'm talking about self-doubt. And what happened in the retreat, I actually wrote a blog post about this, is that I went to my first residential retreat. So I'd been to 1-day retreats prior to that, but I had not been to one where I stayed overnight. So this was a weekend. And I was sitting 20, 30 minutes a day. I had been doing so for a few years. But I didn't understand what it meant to sit for 6 to 8 hours a day. Right now, this was, we'd have 45-minute sits, then we'd have walking meditation, then we'd go back to it. But still, if you are not used to sitting that long, your back and your core and everything is going to be in pain. And that's what I experienced the first full day. And I had just this attack of, this is not for me. Why am I here? I remember one thought being, why aren't you with your kids? Why do you have to be so weird? Like, why can't you just do the stuff that everybody else does? And all this crap. And I think the reason I saw it through it was that I knew my meditation practice had been really good for me. I knew science verified benefits for people beyond me. And so when the doubt voice kind of came after my meditation practice, I realized, I was like, well, that's total crap, that you're trying to get me to leave this retreat or give up or whatever. And so what I ended up doing was, when I saw that, I just started laughing, because I realized, oh, this voice has done this to me my whole life in so many ways. And I saw all the opportunities I'd missed or been robbed of because I listened to it. And so what I did do, though, after that, is I went back in my room, I skipped a session, I stretched, I took a shower, I took care of myself, and then everything was better after that. So I not only learned doubt is not right, but you do have to take care of yourself in the process. And it was a huge lesson, and it's one I'll never forget. So it's not to say that doubt doesn't come up. It does a lot. But what I do more now that I didn't do before was, I learned to acknowledge my fear and I take care of it, or I seek out support from other people. I check myself with other people. I talk to my husband. Am I right about this? Am I wrong about this? I chat with my friends. Before, I would let it stay just in my head, and it would keep me from everything else, and it would make me feel blocked and stuck and alone. And that is the big difference, because a lot of times when I've had ideas, I'll check them with a friend first. And then if they're good, then I'll kind of move forward. Or if they don't like it, but I still really love it, then I'll move forward anyway. But it's that cycle and that spinning in your head that I think is really dangerous. It's getting out of it that gives you the freedom.
Yeah, and I think that's where mindfulness comes to play as far as identifying when you're being judgmental of yourself, because a lot of times we just have fear, we judge ourselves, and we kind of let it just snowball and shuts us down constantly. So the first step, absolutely identifying, and I love that you have like checks in place too to help you identify, okay, how real is this? Well, I don't know, doubt, but how real is this fear or this judgment? And should I go forward with it? And that you still even go with it if you feel like it's the right thing, even if your friend says, no, that's a stupid idea. So
Yeah, I was joking with someone about my book, because when I published it, I remember thinking, oh my God, what if nobody ever buys it? And then I kind of laughed to myself because I thought, you know what, I'll probably just write another book. So when you get to that point, you know what you like, you're just going to do it. So don't worry about it.
talking about your book, I'm really curious about the title. So how to become a badass lawyer. So tell me a little bit about how you came up with that title. What were your thoughts about it at first? Did you kind of have any doubts about that one?
Oh yeah, I always have doubts about everything. So it is to some degree an attention grab. I mean, I'll admit it. Like, marketing matters, and I was trying to get people's attention. I wasn't only trying to get people's attention just in a negative way, though. The word is authentic to me. I had an experience where I litigated a really intense school case during COVID, and they were trying to force open the school before vaccinations of staff and any students had happened. And I had to fight that case. And I knew from practical experience with this particular judge that we were probably going to lose. So that was really hard. I mean, I'm a mom. My child was in this school district. It was intense times. And I don't like to lose either. And I felt like I was responsible for the safety of all the children in my county. And it was like way too intense and too much. And I also felt pretty helpless because I didn't think we could win. And so I did loving kindness practice for myself for the course of 3 nights, because I had real trouble, like really digging into the case and writing the brief and stuff to prep. And so I was doing loving kindness practice all for 3 nights. And the first 2 nights, I just kind of ended up crying. I was a mess. And then finally on the 3rd night, I did the practice. I actually felt it. And I realized all I can do is my best. Like, I'm probably going to lose, and I just have to accept that fact. But that doesn't mean I can't do anything. Because I realized I can be a real pain in the ass when I want to be. I mean, I can block and fight and kick and scream, and make a big mess when I need to. And that's what I decided to do, was that I was just going to fight as hard as I could, try to delay it, make my point, set it up for appeal, and, do what I had to do. And that there was value in standing up for the right thing, even when you lose. And that I believe that. And so I connected with that again. And then I wrote an awesome brief, probably one of the best ones I ever wrote. We did a great job. We did get enjoined, but we ended up getting it. It was mooted by other law shortly thereafter, before it had any effect. So I was terrified in that case. I mean, I was a puddle of goo, but then on the back end of it, I felt like a total badass. And I've written a blog post about that. So to some degree, that's where the title came from, like a true experience for me. But you got to learn these practices. It's because I had the practices in place that I could even do that. If I was brand new to meditation, it wouldn't have worked that way. And hopefully I would have had other supports. But having that practice in place and having that to lean on when things are terrible, it's just a huge power. And to be able to do that while being calm and kind to myself, not damaging myself in the process, but actually building myself up. I mean, that's amazing in terms of how that can feel. And so that's where the title came from. Part of what I try to do with mindfulness and lawyers is to help people understand there's power in it. That it's not just blissing out. It's not just a nice 20-minute sit. And that can be that sometimes. But it's not just about relaxation. It's actually about the permission to feel like a total mess and to feel crazy, so that you can find a way to get back to calm and stability.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that you use love and kindness to be a badass lawyer. It's just, that's pretty cool.
Well, kindness and courage are connected. They are. I mean, they both come from compassion and courage. They come from the same root and they come from our heart. But if you can find a way to be kind in difficulty or to bring kindness to difficulty, I mean, don't you see how courageous that is? I mean, that is badass. And honestly, it's the badassery that the world needs. So I know it's counterintuitive, and it was certainly for me, but it's 100% true.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people that are listening in right now are either new to meditation, mindfulness, don't use it too often, but absolutely are looking for ways to apply it to their business to grow. Um, and I would love for you to just explain a little bit, what does like a loving kindness um, meditation or practice look like so they can apply it tomorrow?
Yeah, and loving kindness is only one of the practices. Now, in my book, I teach 4 different ones, but there are a multitude of practices and different teachers and different resources. So I would say in kind of explore a little bit at the beginning, but then ultimately I'd settle on a few practices that you do consistently. But loving kindness is a practice that is pretty dynamic and includes a few different steps. So that's why in my book I structure it so that you learn breath, then body, then a joy practice to get more accustomed to positive emotions, and then loving kindness, which kind of includes them all. But loving kindness is a practice that is derived from Tibetan Buddhism, and it is where you bring someone to mind, you wish them well with words, and the traditional phrases are, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, and may you be at ease. And then you notice sensations in the area of your heart as you do so. Now, that sounds like a lot, which is why you might want to kind of build some steps up before you can get there. But you start by bringing yourself to mind, then you bring a loved one, then a mentor or teacher, and then you go to a neutral person, then a difficult person, and then out to your community and the whole world. And it can be a very challenging practice. Many people struggle at first with themselves. They may struggle with the neutral or the difficult person, but it actually can be quite magical. And it's amazing what it feels like too. So one thing about compassion cultivation that is really important is that people often think that compassion is about being nice to other people, but it's really about being nice to ourselves and to other people. And when we cultivate compassion for others, we benefit ourselves directly through the release of hormones like oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. But we also, I think, give ourselves a little bit more freedom in understanding that we are connected with other people, but we also have some stability in terms of just not always taking on their emotions. So we get kind of a boundary protection, but also an internal benefit from just doing these practices at all. And I will say, like, cognitively and mentally, when you do some of these practices, it can liberate you and free you a lot. I know to send kindness to a difficult person sounds really counterintuitive, but you can let go of a lot of baggage with difficult people in the process. And it actually offers more freedom and sanity to you. So that's one reason I really love the practice of loving kindness.
Yeah, that's a great practice, one I use too, and just it's awesome to be able to kind of just free yourself of that burden and that judgment of others, the judgment of yourself, and it just opens up that mental space that you talked about for your creativity and the courage. Definitely a practice I would advise as well, and I think that everyone should just pick up your book right now and learn more about that because it's well documented there. Where can people find your book?
So the book is on Amazon, and then it's on most other online booksellers at this point. It's Barnes and Noble, and then bookshop.org are the big ones. But I think if you Google it, you can find it a lot of other places too.
All right, great. So definitely pick up that book. And I know you have a website as well, too, with some pretty cool merch. Want to just give that a quick shout? And
Sure. I have a merch store in case anyone needs a badass lawyer mug or T-shirt. And then one of the things I actually just did it to make gifts for some of the people that supported the book, and I had some lawyers, so I got they got the badass lawyer mug. But for non-lawyers, I did a mug with the loving kindness phrases. On one side, it says, "May I be happy, healthy, safe, and at ease." And on the other side, it says, "May you be happy, healthy, safe, and at ease." And that's actually one of my favorite ones. And people really like that. So there's some fun stuff there. And then I also have the children's book, Mommy Needs a Minute, which is also at Amazon and other online booksellers.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to get myself a mug, and I recommend you get a badass innovator shirt too. I want one of those.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, thank you so much for being on the show today. Great insights, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.